Okay, welcome to today's special LinkedIn Live. Nearly the end of the year, so I'm sure many of you are looking forward to wrapping this one up. I know many people are still under a lot of pressure to get things done this week, so thank you so much for joining us. In the next couple of minutes, we're going to have a real special guest for you today. We've got Melanie Franklin who will be joining us, and we'll be discussing lots of things today around your agile journey for 2021. Sometimes it takes a few moments to get the LinkedIn Live coming up on your phone and notifications or on your desktop. So come and join us. We'll be bringing in Melanie and talking about that. We'll be doing lots of these LinkedIn Lives in the new year. So if you're interested in joining more, we'll share more information with you about it and we'll send you some details. But without waiting any further ado, I'm going to bring Melanie in and hopefully this all works today. Melanie, thanks for joining me.
Nice to be here.
We got there with the tech today, so fantastic. Nice to see you. How you been?
Well, I think it's been an interesting year. I think it's been a really hard year. I was facilitating a call last night where people were honest enough to say that they felt that their work had become so much harder, that virtual lead.
Oh, we've got slight frozen there. Hopefully just a technical issue on Melanie's side with her thing. We'll just wait a couple of seconds and see if that comes back in. Hopefully it comes up. I'll just bring that in there. I think Melanie's frozen, but hopefully her Wi-Fi, I know, has been having problems with her again. We'll just see if it comes up again there. Just give it another second. No, I think it's just waiting to be paused. So while we wait for Melanie, hopefully she'll be coming back on in a second. Some of the topics we're going to cover today, I hope, is talking about vision, terminology, and communication in 2021 and how to plan for that. We're going to be talking about leading virtually and really how it might be different than it was in the workplace. We'll just be talking briefly about how to maintain focus and pace, and enjoy the environment that we're surrounding ourselves in at the moment, getting that right balance, and then also how to sell transformation to habit-loving stakeholders. So those are the challenges that we've got to look forward to. I know we're just waiting for Melanie to come back on. I know she's had some issues with her sound. Hopefully you can hear now. And thanks for joining us, Sarah. Hopefully you can hear. I can hear you. Great, fantastic. I know Melanie's got a few problems with her Wi-Fi this morning, which is an issue. But hopefully she'll be joining us in a couple of minutes. She's got the link, and if not, she can do it via the phone. We're going to be doing, as I said, some more of these LinkedIn Lives in the new year. So if you can just bear with us a couple of minutes, hopefully we'll get Melanie to come back onto there as well. It's been an interesting year as well. I think there's been lots of challenges in the marketplace. A lot of people we've been speaking to, particularly hiring managers and stakeholders that we've been in conversations with over the last 9 months, have probably been pushed to the extreme, taking on a lot more challenges, a lot more jobs, a lot more of their role than they normally would. So it's been a real challenge for them to perhaps manage everything and also think about the planning for 2021, because I'm sure now, hopefully with a little bit of respite for some people, we might have a little bit of time to rest off. I think Melanie's going to be able to join us back now. So hopefully you're there, Melanie. How is it going? Oh, we got a new spot now.
Yes, well, we've got no Wi-Fi. We keep dropping we keep dropping the entire power of the house. So ask me questions quickly is my advice.
We'll get it out. Well, let's jump in, and thanks for some people joining us here. Melanie, why don't you tell us about what's an agile plan look like? What's the vision, terminology, and communications that some people need to be thinking about for 2021?
I think the first thing we really need to say is that if you want your organization to become agile, you need to do a lot of explaining. It's not obvious. People don't get the terminology. I chair meetings all the time where people at the board level are talking about wanting to be agile, but for them it's got nothing to do with the brand names of Scrum and Less and Safe. They've never heard of them, they don't know about them. So if you do want to move your organization towards a more agile approach, I think there's two things. First of all, it's the mindset which says, do you know what, maybe nobody else knows what I'm talking about, and maybe the benefits we're talking about aren't as obvious to everybody else. And the second thing is, coupled with that mindset of openness and not sort of not expecting everybody to know what you're talking about, is that realization that there's a lot of key concepts behind agile that are a real difference in how you do things. Let me just take one really simple thing. We talk often about prioritizing our work. It's core to agile. At the end of the day, I'm going to use maybe Moscow, the must have, should have, could have, and won't have this time, to be able to ensure that whether I'm working in sprints or increments, I don't overpromise and underdeliver. And so I'll look at my must-haves, I'll look at my top priority items, I will groom the backlog or the prioritized requirements list, whatever I'm talking about, and make sure I do the must-haves first, then the shoulds, and then the coulds. And you know what? That works brilliantly if you understand it. And it offers us tremendous value. But the most important thing we need to realize is that in Moscowing something, we're taking decisions, and we've got senior leaders who need to take decisions, which says, I'm going to prioritize that thing, which means I'm going to close out the option of doing that thing over there. And I think that's the essence of agile, which is the techniques sit on the surface and they're intuitive, they are easy to apply, but they do require a complete willingness to change how you do things. People are stunned when I start talking about Moscow being really difficult to achieve, because they look on the surface and go, oh, it's really simple. And I go, but let's think what we're doing with Moscowing. We are Moscowing. We're prioritizing against the benefits. So first of all, these are the benefits. We've got to be absolutely clear. These are the benefits we're going for. And you have to ask yourself, with every idea of the work, is that delivering the top level of benefit? Then that's a must have. If this is delivering not that much benefit, it's a could have. So the first thing you need to do is to have a conversation about what is the upside of what it is that we're doing. It doesn't sound difficult, does it? But you sit in a boardroom and you ask people why they want to do something, and that's when it starts to fall apart, because they know what they want to do, but they're just not sure why they want to do it. And therefore, we have to facilitate some very big conversations about the benefits. I often do a little table of 3 tiers of benefits. Tier 1, and I'm a bit hesitant about using tiers now that Boris Johnson has adopted it in a completely different way.
Didn't take it from you, did he?
No, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 definitely doesn't work anymore. But the top level, let's call them levels now, shall we? The top level of benefit is revenue up, cost down. The second level of benefit is that you have greater customer satisfaction, you have greater staff engagement, and you have greater regulatory compliance if you're a regulated business. And then the level below that is things like, we want to be more innovative, we want to be faster, we want more streamlined processes, whatever those are. Mm-hmm. And I think you have to facilitate a conversation around what kind of benefits are we looking for before you can start to use something like Moscow. And then the second thing you've got to be willing to do to be able to do just that one element of agile is that you've got to be prepared to accept that if this is decision making, and decision making means loss. If I choose this thing over here, I'm not going to choose this thing over here. And that means that I am full of risk, because if I choose this thing and it's not the right thing, what will happen to my career? So there's an awful lot of people who really, in terms of coaching them through the adoption of agile, I just want to say, guys, it's not a methodological thing. You can use any brand of agile you like, but it doesn't get us away from the difficulties. So when it comes to terminology, a lot of people don't know what we're talking about. But I think when it comes to adoption, we've got a big mountain to climb in terms of taking our audience with us. Somebody said to me last night, she said, you appear to be implying that we have to have an articulate conversation with people, and we need to be persuasive, we need to market this. And I said, yes, we do. But we can't just say we're doing it this way and expect everybody to follow us. So I think for me, I don't think it's just a 2021 issue either. I think this is the next few years we'll still be explaining what agile is. It's been around a long time, and we've got pockets of success, but we haven't won the argument yet. So we've got a lot more to do.
Yeah, it's a really good point about that marketing, as you rightly said there. And what are the tips and advice that you can give people around that communication, whether it's at the board level or further down in the business?
I think the most important part of any communication is ask, don't tell. And so it's a case of just trying to engage in a two-way conversation, which is, instead of just doing a broadcast message that says these are the things I'm going to tell you about agile, try to find out what people's understanding of agile is already, and shy away from trying to tell them how to do it. Concentrate much more on the bigger concepts and what those concepts, like collaboration, like iterative development, what those concepts will actually give them in terms of business value. But probably the most important thing is that you ask them what their understanding is, and then you'll find when they reply back to you, there's two things that happen. Number one is that those answers are full of sort of errors and misunderstandings. You'll need to correct those in a gentle way. But also their answers will give you a very good steer about their own perspective. And they might give you answers that keep on about sort of faster to market, or sometimes they'll talk about that it's cheaper to do it this way, or it's more responsive to change. They've probably picked up some things, but it will, whatever they tell you, gives you a bit of an understanding about what their priorities are, and maybe angle your argument towards meeting their needs.
How have you seen things changing from being in person and having those support to a virtual environment? And again, what advice would you give any people that are moving into, managing a management role, or already in a managing role, to manage through this in a virtual environment, basically?
I think the general view of everybody I've talked to, it's not just my own experience of it, is that the virtual leadership takes a lot more energy, a lot more effort, and it takes longer to get anything done. We don't realise, do we, how much of a relationship we build up as we're walking down the hallways to and back from meetings, perhaps meeting people in the kitchen, where we get to say hi to people we haven't met before, when we're making a cup of tea or coffee. We don't realise that incrementally that builds up into a familiarity, and that familiarity and a recognition of each other, that physical recognition. Oh, I know who you are. I know who you are. We don't recognise that that's building up. And when it's taken all away, you have to start thinking, how am I going to create that? I know a lot of managers who have taken new roles this year and are managing people they've never physically met. And I think the learning from every situation has been, right, we need to invest much more time in a call where perhaps I've got a couple of agenda items, but most of the call is getting to know you. There's enough space in the call to maybe get people. You can see that I've had to move from my office. I've come up into my kitchen because I'm closest to the router. So if the power goes down again, I can plug us back in. There'll be a few minutes when I've got no Wi-Fi, but I'll do my best. And I'm just being honest, and I'm being human, because there's nothing else I can do about it. And it's getting to know me and getting to know the pressures I'm under. So you can recognize that I might be having a pretty awful day. If you lose power every 20 minutes in a house, it's pretty upsetting. And I cannot get the builders to understand that every time they plug in their drill, which has got cables poking out of it, that's probably when we lose the power. So there's a humanity here that you have to invest in, and it takes a lot more time. So I think, and that you have to keep going on that. And it has to be coupled with the fact that you have to be willing to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to share some of your own story. It's like somebody described it as a never-ending series of first dates, where at least nobody has to pick up the bill. But you have to keep going back and chatting to people you've never met before and finding areas of commonality. You read any book on psychology and relationships, and it will all be about what we are doing as human beings is to find areas of commonality. There's something really interesting in the brain about how the brain works, which is that if I think that you and I have got something in common, when you speak to me, I hear what you're saying with the same part of the brain that I use when I am speaking. So I give you the benefit of the doubt. So if we build that kind of relationship, I'm thinking, oh, you're on my side, you're one of us, then I will feel a connection with you. And I think that it's building that connection through the time, but also one of the other really important things is taking the time to flesh out what is it that we are all here to do? It sounds a bit highfalutin to talk about common objectives and common goals, but again, from the brain's perspective, if we all look like we're going in the same direction, then again, I feel connected to you, and there's a sense of belonging that will enable us to build that relationship. So
I think that's really good. And I see John. I'm just going to bring him up on screen. John just mentioned about the virtual coffee breaks, and I totally agree, John. I think we've also heard from some of our clients and our network who have almost put their CEO in random rooms on like a virtual room, so you can have that connection as you would do in the corridor of an office. So I think those are really important, where you're connecting into people and finding out more about them. I mean, obviously that's going to be a challenge into 2021. It's not going to go away, is it?
Well, I think from everything we can see, and I chair some CEO panels around the world, and I think the last time we talked, must have been about 6 months ago now, and we were talking about we won't see any movement until the autumn. And now I think we can understand that with the vaccination program, the UK have announced today that they've already vaccinated 140,000 people, which sounds amazing. But when you think the population of the country is in excess of 60 million, maybe not so much. Here where I live in Spain, we haven't begun that process because the European Medicines Agency hasn't yet approved the vaccine. And where I work in the States, the FDA, the Federal Drug Administration, are in the process of certainly from Moderna's point of view, they're going to be signing off a vaccine very soon. But I think it's fair to say that this time next year, perhaps we will have returned, and I don't want to use the word normality because I don't think that's right. We will have returned to a hybrid model. I think there's a general view that there will be opportunities to physically meet. So we'll be going into the office for certain things. For many of us in the knowledge worker and the agile community that we are all part of, we're all knowledge workers. So there's a very good chance that we certainly won't be doing the 5 days a week in the office. We're obviously not a hospital worker, a retailer. We don't have to be in front of our customers physically. And so we probably won't be. But we'll be returning to some kind of hybrid model. But it won't be until long after the summer. But I have chaired a couple of panels recently where when 2 weeks ago, when the vaccine was sort of in the UK was first sort of, we've got it. There was a sort of view that maybe what's going to happen is that the vaccination program will roll out in the coming months and we'll get to summer. And summer was a moot point, end of June, July, August, something like that, where as a population, we will get to a point where we just go, it's over. We've been holding our breath. We don't realize we've been holding our breath, but that's the level of persistent stress that we are all under. There's a level of chronic stress, not acute, but chronic stress that we are all under at the moment, which is making life feel so hard, so tiring. And it might be that is the air that comes out the tire in the summer, because we're out the other side now. There's still a lot, there's still going to be mountains to climb, but we will be out the other side in that the vaccination programs in many countries will be significantly underway. We'll be starting to talk more about traveling, seeing our families. That's where perhaps when we go, yes, then what I found interesting about the CEOs and CFOs I was talking to was this consideration around productivity may dip quite considerably. We're all working pretty hard at the moment, and I know an awful lot of people who are not taking what would normally be a traditional 2-week break over Christmas and New Year. They're not taking that time off because they're going to me, and I'm in the same boat. There's nowhere to go. There's no one to see. I mean, I'm running one of my Agile Change Agent courses next week purely because so many people ask me, I've got some time, I'm furloughed from my contract, or there's no real pressure on me next week, Mel. I'd really like to get this qualification. What are you planning to do? And this was a conversation that happened about last month. And I sort of said, yeah, all right. Yeah, I'll do it. I'll do Monday, Tuesday. Because you're right. It's the 20th and the 21st to 22nd of December. You're right. There's December, 25th of December, I'm kind of busy with lunch, but that's about it.
Let's get on with it.
There's nowhere else to go. So I think that there is this whole idea of with this attitude, not just over the Christmas period, but also into January through June, let's maybe front end some of the effort we're making. So if you're conceiving of projects right now, and I'm about to do a handhold an organization through another big one throughout 2021, but a lot of my planning is around, okay, let's just work on the assumption that perhaps in August, maybe July, August, but August, September, there'll be a couple of months where people actually want us to take our foot off the pedal, and that productivity won't be quite as strong. And maybe we should plan for that. We've always said, people have some time off in the summer, but maybe the summer of 2021 is going to be something like we've never experienced before, where people are going to, if there's a lovely sunny day and you can go and sit in the park with friends and be with people, then you are going to leave the office if you're physically in the office at 4:00. If you're working from home, you are going to have a lunch out with friends that might last 3-4 hours because you can be with people. So I think we just have to maybe think about the scenario, which is the human race is going to reconnect on a physical level later in 2021. And I'm not sure that from a productivity in business perspective, that's going to be our top end. Let's plan for that.
Now we're gonna talk about from the survival of this year to hopefully a more enjoyable, second, third, fourth quarter of 2021 as these vaccines roll out and as some more normality returns. And I want to touch on how to maintain focus and pace. But before you do, I will mention Sarah's comment, because she said that she uses the coffee roulette. And I like the idea of switching up the groups. I thought that was really good. I just wondered if, Sarah, if you're allowed to put a shot of Bailey's in it, or you can at least do that in December, because I'm sure there's some people coming to these groups with a few dodgy drinks. Anyway, that's a really great idea, Sarah. And I'm seeing this more and more where organizations have done lots of clever things to really keep not only colleagues involved, but how do you engage with other stakeholders outside of your normal peer group? Let's just touch on that bit about maintaining focus and pace. So what do you see that people can do to keep that moving forward into next year, so that there's no roadblocks and they can progress and move things forward? What's your opinion?
I think there is an element here of smart working. Let's start with the perspective that we're all a bit tired, and that it's all been a bit hard, but yet we still have a whole load of stuff to do. Okay, that's fine. So let's try and make sure that when it comes to it, let's be smart. So let's go back to Moscowing again. If I want to keep the pace up, what I need to be able to keep pace and momentum is a feeling of achievement. What that's going to happen in my brain is that every time I achieve, when I finish things, I get a hit of dopamine that's sort of, that's really an addictive drug. It's more addictive than heroin, isn't it? And it's that achievement piece that we're looking for. So I think my advice, if you want to keep the pace up throughout the coming months, you have to be really smart. Do not let your energy dissipate on things where you're very busy, but ultimately they're not necessarily the most valuable things that you could be doing. And that means talking to your team as well and cutting out the rubbish. You all know that you go to several meetings a week, which actually you don't need to be at. So let's get smarter. Let's say, what is the agenda for this meeting? What decisions do we have to take by the end of this meeting? Do I really need to go to this meeting? Would this meeting be cancelled if I were off sick? If the answer is no, then really you're not that essential. And I think I've been reading an awful lot of profiles, Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review, and Forbes and McKinsey, about how very senior leaders have coped successfully during COVID. And there is one unifying thread running through all of it, which is they've been very smart about meetings. They've been very smart about protecting their time to get things done. And we talk a lot about achievement, and we talk a lot about getting things completed in agile. And I think there is that one unifying thread that runs through every one of those interviews, which is about being smarter. They haven't necessarily used those phrases. They haven't used the phrase Moscow. But what they've been able to say is, if I spend an hour on this meeting, we will achieve this, this, and this. Therefore, it's worth going to. If people are calling me into meetings, but they don't know why they're calling me into a meeting, there's no agenda, we don't know what the decision is at the end of it, then that's a waste of time.
Now, I'll just throw a curveball in there, Melanie, because that's all well and good, and you have to have an air of confidence to be able to say these kind of things.
Yep.
But you don't always have that opportunity where you might have more stronger stakeholders that are pushing for you to be there. How do you mitigate that?
Well, I think the thing is, I mean, after all, I've got a lot of clients and I don't necessarily have a choice. But what I will say, I'll be very gentle about it in my email. And I will say very honestly, can you tell me what the key decision or intended outcomes of this meeting so that
Yep.
I can read up and prepare for the meeting?
Brilliant. Yeah.
So I just let them know that I'm going to put some effort into this meeting, but I can't unless they tell me what it's about. And I might, and I've done this before where I might have 2 or 3 or 4 emails going back and forth, because what my very gentle email has alerted people to is that actually they're not really that sure what the meeting's for. I might even suggest, sometimes it depends on the stakeholder, and I have to be careful with some of my stakeholders, but I might go back to them and say, it's great that you're getting us all together. With those people in the room, these are the key things that I would like us to decide by the end of the meeting. I'm sure you've got lots of things as well. Could you let me know what else we need to add to this? And almost like gently sort of help them pull together an agenda, rather than sort of embarrassing them at the start of a meeting by going, well, what's the agenda then? What are we here for? And I do want to see that beforehand. So I will sort of look at my diary, and I will have that conversation and try to work out what it is that we need to do.
And where does those follow-up come from? So, again, those difficult meetings, how can you communicate that follow-up and keep that pace up whilst keeping reputation of senior stakeholders, for example?
Well, I mean, I did it this morning where I called somebody after a meeting 2 nights ago, and I did it one-on-one, and it was a call. It wasn't a Zoom meeting. It was just a call, just a chat, say hi, and just to almost like debrief the meeting to decide where we go next and what was happening. It happened to be a meeting that I was worried hadn't gone anywhere. And I'm sure we've all been in those. So I sat down and thought, right, okay, what did I hear in that meeting? Let me just go back over the notes I took. And I am really trying to take a lot of notes in meetings so I can stay focused. So I looked back at my notes, and there was lots of chit chat and there wasn't a lot going on. And I looked at some of the themes, and I think the reason that it didn't go anywhere is that people weren't prepared to step in and take decisions over some of the difficult stuff. So what I did this morning was I went back to this person and I said, there's an interesting meeting the other night. I think we discussed a lot, but I don't know about you, but I noticed that we didn't actually walk away with deliberate actions that we were all going to take.
Yep.
I think that the actions we need to take are this, and I think I'm willing to do this one if you're willing to do that one. And it was just a sort of one-to-one negotiation so that we could move things forward and get things done. But you have those meetings where it's been chat and that you haven't got anywhere, and you end up frustrated and you think, oh, and we've scheduled that again next week, so we're going to have another waste of time. So I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to give them a quick call and see if I can break the deadlock, because this could go on forever.
Absolutely. So let's talk about, well, a bit similar thread on that, but let's talk about governance versus innovation and getting that right, which is not always easy, again, depending what type of organization people are engaged with. What's your thoughts on that? What are your clients and the wider market telling you?
Well, I think that to be honest, there's not a lot we can do in certain regulated businesses and certain very hierarchically driven businesses. You will have layers of governance where you have to escalate up through those layers of governance because people's authority levels are such that it has to be considered. Now, I find it deeply frustrating, but I'm trying to do my best. So what I do is this, way before we get to that governance innovation piece. It's test. If we use something from Agile for a moment, it's test-driven development, or it's the acceptance criteria. So what I try to do is identify the criteria by which this is the criteria that something must meet. This is the results of the test against those criteria. And therefore, I'm providing data that goes up through those layers of governance. if you have an organization with lots of layers of governance, it's not always within our remit to get rid of those layers or to circumnavigate them, because that way we'll get fired. So we have to play the game, if you like. And what I found, I mean, I had it this morning with a report where somebody had done the same thing to me, and I was totally impressed, because what they had done, they wanted my sign off on something. And what they had done is they'd said, this was the position 3 months ago, this is the position now. And they had highlighted any significant gaps and reasons for the gaps. And was I happy to proceed on that basis? Because where they had a gap, they had some actions they were going to take. And it just made it so easy. There was actually 5 pages of this report, so it wasn't an insubstantial amount of activity. But my God, it was brilliant, because you could easily see in the table 3 months ago what it is now, what the issues, actions, discrepancies are, what we're doing about them, and will I sign off? And each one, as I went through the pages, because there were lots where there was no difference, or this is being completed, and then the ones with the actions I could just focus on. And it's that kind of, somebody had put a lot of effort into that, to do that. They'd thought in a very organized way, and it really helped. The point I'm making about this criteria and the comparison of what was and what is happening is that what we get away from is we get away from governance layers where the danger is, how do they feel? Do you feel you want to sign this off? And of course, how they feel is subjective. I don't want subjectivity. I want objectivity. Has it met the criteria? Yes or no? If yes, then you have to sign it off. That's what we want. I mean, all of us are subject to this at the moment. You don't want the European Medicines Agency, the FDA, all their scientists, their scientific review committees, which are stuffed full. You might have 60 scientists in a room. You don't want them all going, oh, how do I feel about this? No, it's not feelings. It's, this is the data. These were the criteria. Has it met them? Has it not? So if you've got layers of governance, the more governance you've got, be alert to the fact that if you don't do criteria-driven decision-making, then you're going to find that ultimately there'll be somebody who doesn't feel it, and therefore they'll veto it, and you'll be back. It's like snakes and ladders, after all. Governance is like snakes and ladders. And the snakes, it goes right back down to the bottom, and you have to start climbing the ladders again. You don't want to do that, because you totally lose motivation, let alone lose time. So go for it.
It's an interesting one, and I know that one of the biggest challenges many people mention to us is trying to change habits that when they're going through a transformation. And I mean, it's a big topic in itself, but let's touch on that. How do you sell transformation to habit-loving stakeholders, as it were?
Well, I think the thing is that if somebody loves a particular habit, first of all, surround what you're asking them to do with a whole load of stuff about what does remain the same. Because if you ask somebody to change something, then what happens in the human brain is we look at that sort of threat and we think, oh, now everything's changing. Well, what you have to do is help them focus in on, no, it's just this little change that we're asking you to make. So first of all, I'm advising you to get the scope of the change right. And it's just the way the human brain looks at something. I was looking at this with my building work that's going on here today, which is driving me crazy. And I remember this morning I was walking the dog, and I was just doing exactly this to myself, which was step back a moment, Mel, and just look. It looks like everything's in chaos, but actually it isn't. This staircase still works. These handrails are still in place. This path is still there. This lighting still works. So just remind myself all the things. Now focus in. This staircase does need to be rebuilt. So just focus in on, actually, out of everything, it's just this pit here needs to be rebuilt, but everything else is staying the same. And you do find, actually, when you do that, that the stress level comes down. You just start to feel that little bit better. So that's the first thing, because what you're doing is you're setting people up for being able to cope. Because at the end of the day, if people look at something and go, oh, that's far too involved, or I can't do that, they're not going to break a habit, because it looks like, oh, if I break that routine, everything else is going to come down on my head. So you want to get the scope right and make people feel this is doable. You're okay. It's doable. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that you have to talk them through what's really happening, which is that, and I always find the gym analogy really helpful here, is that if you are creating a new habit, then you have to prepare for it. You have to put, you have to build it into your day. So if I say I want to start going to the gym every day, or I want to start going for a run after work, well, what do I do? The best thing I do is when I get up in the morning, I set out my running kit. Because when I finish work, probably I'm not going to go to a gym because they're all closed. But if I want to go for a run after work, I finish work and my gym kit is sat there somewhere in my line of sight. And I go, right, okay, I'm going to get into my gym kit now. I'm going to go for a run. That you prepare the groundwork. And I think we can partner with people when we're asking them to break a habit. We can partner with them to help them prepare all the groundwork for creating the new habit. We can help them work out things like, well, do you pack, would you be best to set out your gym kit the night before, or do you prefer to do it first thing in the morning? What works for you? You're no longer sort of saying, maybe you should set out your gym kit. You're saying, when should you do it? You're just edging them towards something. But it's those environmental factors, getting everything prepared much easier. I mean, I've been dealing with some changes to bank accounts with a finance admin team. And I've sort of said, right, okay, guys, right, we're all working from home offices. Why don't we just print out in quite big letters and numbers the actual new bank accounts, the sort codes, the name of the accounts, all those things that we're going to be tapping in and using, because it's not all auto text anymore, because we're moving to a new system. And until we've typed it in 100 times, it probably won't be automatic. So why don't we, because you're breaking the habit of the last 7 years, you've had your bank account with this other organization. So the sort code, the account number, and everything about it is second nature. Why don't we just help ourselves? Let's print that. And we've all agreed that we've got that printout off to the side of our computers. We can look at it. And so it's preparing the groundwork if you really want people to move away from a habit, however big that habit is.
Yeah, I was going to say, and just thinking out loud in the world where you might have that hiring manager who's been in the business for 20 years. The processes work. You're coming along to change everything, and I'm resistant to that change because actually this thing's working really well as it is. Might be more difficult to build that relationship remotely as well. But what tips and advice would you give to that real difficult? And it could be quite senior stakeholders in the business that don't want to disrupt, even if it's being called upon from other parts of the business. What advice and tactics would you use to open that relationship, to see other ways of working?
I think the first thing is I'm just being empathetic in that I'm walking in their shoes and I am acknowledging that actually change and what I'm asking them to do is a huge imposition. It's a huge annoyance. We've all experienced change this year in all sorts of ways. So just think about how you felt, whether it's the idea of having to learn Zoom calls, having to learn to set up LinkedIn Live, having to try to work out breakout rooms in Microsoft Teams. Just think of any new routine you've had to take on at work and how it's slowed you down. You've made mistakes. It's just infuriating. And that is the attitude that you come at with the stakeholder, because that's exactly what you're asking them to do. So the first thing is that you can sort of say, you come with a mindset that you recognize that actually you're a problem, not a solution. The second thing is that honor the past, which means that you recognize that what they're doing right now does actually work. And to pretend anything else is disingenuous. What they're doing right now is fit for purpose. It's very cost effective because they know how to do it. They do it very quickly. So if you try to spin in there sometimes and sell, this is going to fix all your problems, when they don't have any problems, then you're going to sound like an idiot and you're certainly not going to be persuasive. I've got one coming up in the first quarter where everything they do right now is completely fit for purpose. They are not asking for their entire processing system to be replaced. And it's going to come down on their heads. And so the attitude is saying, you're right, there is absolutely nothing wrong with what you do right now. The reason that we're making this move is because actually the game's changed. We didn't ask for it to change, but our customers' experience, our customers' demand of customer service has shifted. Now, it hasn't completely shifted, but there's a pathway. We can see all the indicators about how our customers want, for example, the online, offline experience to be tightened up. They want much faster response to their customer service. I want an instant reply when I'm dealing with somebody. There are lots of indicators of how the customer experience is changing. And what's happened is that if they're going on that path, we've realized that there's an upward trajectory, that they're going to carry on going up. So what we're trying to do is we know that they've got this far. We're trying to get ahead of that curve. And so you're right, there's nothing wrong with what you do right now. Actually, you just have, what we're doing here is the benefit of future proofing. And that's what I'm selling to people. But you have to provide the data that shows, do you know what? This is where we understand, this is why we've got this future, because we've worked out that actually this is where our customers are heading. They're not there yet, you're right. We've only got that far so far, or that far, or that far. But that is where we're heading. So I'm building for this, and I know it's really frustrating because what you're doing right now absolutely is okay. But as we go up this mountain, what you do right now will drift further and further away from meeting those customer needs.
Yeah.
And you're nodding because you know that that's an honesty. You can't get away from anything other than being completely honest, because anything less than that, and you will sound like you cannot be trusted, and nothing you say will have any effect after the moment that you've lost trust. So it's just being honest.
Melanie, you've shared some great insights. I'm going to just ask you a final bonus kind of question, as it were. What's your insights for 2000? What can we look forward to in agile transformations in 2021?
I think we have to look at the lessons of COVID. Those organizations that were able to make changes very, very quickly, to not only moving all of their staff into virtual worlds, but also moving a lot of their business onto online models, they've stayed in business, or in some cases they've thrived. In the United Kingdom, we've got some examples of organizations that, frankly, it wasn't just COVID that put them over the edge. But if you think of the Arcadia Group, for example, if you think of Debenhams, they haven't moved with the times. And certainly the Arcadia Group had not invested in any way on its online business in the way that Boohoo or ASOS had. And therefore, it wasn't COVID that put them over the edge. What COVID did was they accelerated a trend that they were going to go out of business at some point if they carried on like that. But unfortunately, what happened was the future came right down on top of them. So we know that there's a groundswell of a sort of experience now that says, do you know what, changing quickly is a really good thing. And I think what we can do in 2021 is that we can use all of those examples as reasons why perhaps we should move to a more agile way of working. We've got some fantastic successes. Let's use them as the examples.
I think you're right there. I think you're right, and the ones that have embraced it will probably keep pushing forward and innovating. So that's fantastic. Melanie, thanks so much for joining me and joining us, and thank you everyone for participating. I think you said you got some courses coming up next week. I think anyone can find it. How do they find out about that if they're interested in those?
If you just link in with me and I'll send you the details, but it's the Agile Change Agent qualification, and it's Monday, Tuesday next week, and we're just going to have a laugh because there's it's a great couple of days. You learn lots of techniques, but also we're going to be eating chocolate in every break together. So what we said about coffee roulette and virtual coffee breaks, but we're going to be doing virtual chocolate breaks throughout the course.
That sounds worth signing up for just for that. Melanie, thanks so much for joining us. Thank you everyone for joining, and we look forward to joining more LinkedIn Lives in the new year, and I hope you have a good break with your family over the Christmas period if you get one. Thank you very much. Thanks, Melanie.
Okay. Bye.